Okay, I think I'm recording here. Well, hello. Hope everybody's doing well. Talking kind of quietly because everyone else here is asleep. It's kind of late, sort of a dream of mine to be teaching, at night and sleeping a little longer in the morning, I guess. But anyways, here's today's stuff on Canvas. So, make sure you go there and check it out. I'm going to do a quick review of genetic equilibrium. Make sure you kind of understand what that's about and how it connects to the evolution topics we've been learning about. That's going to be number one here. Just watch that. That's what you're watching right now, I guess. And take some notes if you need to. Maybe you don't. After that, I'm going to do another mini lesson on some things we haven't talked about much yet. So make sure that you take notes on that, and actually have a link right here for you to submit a picture of the notes that you take. You're welcome. And then there's a lab for you to do. It's kind of a lab. It's obviously not in the real classroom lab. Link for that. And then lastly, I found a really good article about evolution and this coronavirus, so you can kind of relate some things you're learning to what's going on in life right now. Again, over here, the things due by Friday at 8 p.m. are these things over here. So a picture of your notes, the biochemical evidence lab, and then the questions from that article. Then again, there's links to each of these over here, the same links that are over here as well. All right, so let's review genetic equilibrium quickly. All right, gonna try this laser pointer. It's pretty cool. So the Hardy-Weinberg equation and genetic equilibrium. So the equation is really just a way to monitor whether or not frequencies of alleles are changing. And again, remember, if they are changing, that means the population's evolving. If they're not, then it's at genetic equilibrium. And we specifically looked at these 5 things. And what this is saying, that if there were to be genetic equilibrium, these things would have to be true. There could be no mutations. The population would have to be really large so that there would be no genetic drift. There could be no migration, no natural selection, and no, or that there would have to be random mating. There could not be any selection of mates. So for a population to be at genetic equilibrium, these things would have to be true. So let's take a look at these things. So mutations. This again is just showing really that mutations are going to happen. It's not really possible to have no mutations, but this is really review for you. You guys know that mutations are just changes in DNA sequences that may lead to causing a quote breaking or a malfunction in a gene, amino acids not produced right, and it was some genetic disorder, or it could add a new allele to a population. Like that's where things like blue eyes and green eyes came from originally. So again, they're you don't really need to look at that. So again, that's not possible to have no mutations. There's always going to be mutations in a population. So let's talk about genetic drift. This was probably the toughest idea. So what it's really is referring to is that there can be some random losses of alleles when a population is small. So again, in small populations, random events can have a larger effect, and that's called genetic drift. Here's kind of a visual way of looking at that. So you have a fairly small population here of, I don't know, hamsters or guinea pigs. And if by chance, just a couple of them reproduce, the next generation would have, like if it was this dark one, this light one, there may end up being more light ones in that next generation. And then, so say just two light ones reproduce, then by chance, you could end up with all of the light colored individuals, and you've sort of lost the dark ones. They've drifted out of the population. Something you might see in your life or hear about is something called a bottleneck effect, which leads to genetic drift. And the idea with that is you could have originally a large population that might have like three different colors, blue, white, and yellow. And then some bottlenecking event happens. It could be anything that would cause the population to decrease dramatically, like overhunting or a natural disaster, something that, closes down the population. So in here, you end up with only a few individuals left, most of them being blue. And it could happen that, maybe the white one just doesn't reproduce, so that white alleles drift out of the population. So again, population has to be small for genetic drift to happen. And then the other thing you might see in your life or hear about is something called the founder effect, where you get some individuals leave a population and they go to found. That's why they're called founder effect. They found a new population somewhere. And in this case, it went from being mostly all blue to the founder population being more red than blue. And again, that since it's so small, the blue could eventually be lost altogether. Let me get through this real quick. So, and just going back to the concept that genetic drift is pretty likely to happen. It's not, you're not always going to have a huge population. The next thing was the idea of migration. Again, it's pretty simple here. If any individuals enter or leave the population, that's going to mess up the frequency of alleles. So again, you're always going to have some migration. It's not possible to have no migration. Next would be natural selection. So yeah, I mean, you guys know natural selection pretty well. Some things we didn't get a chance to really talk about much is something called types of selection. There's what's called directional selection, where one specific direction, like being really large or really small or really fast or really slow, becomes an advantage and is selected for. Disruptive selection would be where, like an average height or something is not a good thing. So either being like really tall or really short, both of those would be would increase and the average would decrease. Again, directional means just one direction. Disruptive means the two extremes are favored and the average is not. And then lastly is stabilizing. So the opposite of disruptive would mean the average is favored and becomes more common, and the two extremes are less. But at any rate, those, again, natural selection, that's always going to happen. It's not possible to have no natural selection. And lastly is random mating. There's never random mating, and especially animals. There's always going to be selection of mates, which is going to mess up the allele frequencies and cause a population to evolve. And usually you can see this where typically the males of a species are brighter and more flamboyant kind of than the females, because the females are the ones choosing the mates. So here in this particular species, a female up here, a male down here, the male has a long tail, a little brighter colored. Same with this species over here. The female is really, brownish color. The male is black, long tail. Again, because the females will choose the mates and, again, mess up genetic equilibrium. And just to wrap this up, if allele frequencies stay the same, it's at genetic equilibrium, the population's not evolving. But if the allele frequencies do change, population is going to evolve. And again, for a population to not change or not evolve, there has to be no mutations, no genetic drift, no migration, no natural selection. Mating has to be completely random. Again, it's never been seen in a natural population where at least one of these was causing the population to evolve. So there's always going to be mutations. There can be times when populations are going to be small. There's always migration, always natural selection, and mates are always non-random. The mates are chosen. So, all right. So that was just kind of wrapping that up and reviewing that, and making sure you understood what was going on. The Hardy-Weinberg equation is just a way to track those allele frequencies mathematically. All right. So that's it for this video, and I will do the other one here in a minute.